Hello, so today we're going to be going over Ornn artifacts as an Ornn artifact guide. So Ornn artifacts are basically like items you can get dropped. They're supposed to be powerful versions or these powerful items that you can use in order to convert like a spot from maybe not an okay spot to like a winning spot or a very strong spot. There's also portals and galaxies that use Ornn artifacts, so it's really important to understand how to use them and when they're good and what situations you would want to pick certain Ornn artifacts over other Ornn artifacts. If you're talking about how to get Ornn artifacts, one of the main ways you can get them is from augments. There's augments like Living Forge, What the Forge, Capricious Forge. Basically anything that says Forge gives you an Ornn artifact. In general, they average alright. You'll see something like Portable Forge is not that great, but things like Latent Forge, because a silver augment, is pretty good, and the other ones are just good because of item economy, right? Living Forge and What the Forge give you a good chance of finding quote-unquote Exodia. Getting many Ornn artifacts is always better than just hoping you hit. The current landscape of Ornn artifacts in the game is that some of them are very good, some of them are not so good, but in general, it's very easy to find an Ornn artifact pairing with certain units that just gives you like what I would call Exodia, which means like, you know, you win on the spot. It's very, very strong, it's hard to deal with, and we'll talk about a lot of those as we go through this slideshow that I made. Charms also can give you Ornn artifacts. These generally skew the results. If you look at Ornn artifacts, they'll always say that they're really, really good if you look at the stats of the artifact in particular. A lot of the reason for that is because a lot of late game charms give you Ornn artifacts. So a lot of winning boards are going to have Ornn artifacts on them, because if you make it to like stage 5, stage 6, stage 7, you have a bunch of 5 costs, you're probably going to have Ornn artifacts. That's just something that's occurring in this set in particular. And also, there's the game start portal, and this one's the one that's the most important, because I think that, I don't know how different skill level of players deal with this, right? I think that if you don't know what the Ornn artifacts do, or you don't have a really good understanding of the game and the units of the game, I find that like game start portal is like one of the worst things. I hate it even in my elo, which right now is like around diamond, by the way. Trying to get to masters, but I kind of quit for the week. But anyways, when you have the game start portal, a lot of times you're just like crossing your fingers. It's like, okay, I'm gonna pop this anvil, and if I hit Exodia, like if I have something that fits my board really, really well, then I can play for first, and if not, I kind of have to salvage the game and pick something that I can kind of generically use and play for top 4. And it's really easy to get like hoed on the first portal, and I hate that one, but you know, that's me and that's my playstyle. Maybe that's something that you enjoy a lot, and by all means, enjoy it, have fun, and enjoy your games. So in terms of this slideshow, the terms I'm going to use, I'm going to say generic. When I say generic for an Ornn item, what I mean is that it's good on most units. So there's a lot of units that you can play it on, as well as like pretty much any 5 cost, right? So that means like late game, if you buy an Ornn artifact, you can just put it on any 5 cost and you'll be fine. You don't have to worry about the item in particular working out. When I say specific, it's because the Ornn artifact has conditions or certain situations where the units don't necessarily apply, and we'll talk about those when we get to those Ornn artifacts. And then forcing is usually when it's like these are usually like the Exodia ones. These are the ones where it's like you hit it and it's like, okay, I can just win the game on the spot with this so long as I play X specific units. The other way that they're forcing is that if it's a very, very, very specific Ornn item that has a specific use case, then it's like, okay, well, I can't just take this. I have to play a specific board in order to make this work. It might not be game winning. It might not be as bad as like forcing a particular reroll, but it will still be very, very, very difficult to play unless you have the exact units that it works on. Then in terms of just Ornn artifacts in general, when do you take Ornn artifacts? Ornn artifacts are actually really, really good. As much as they are generic or specific or blah, 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 Exodia, there is a really big use case for Ornn artifacts, and that's usually when your comp requires many, many items. That's usually when you take something like Capricious Forge, the augment, in order to get Blacksmith Gloves. So for example, I'll put like, you know, there's this board, it used to be very, very good. It was like Karma, Fiora, Gwen, Callista. Like sometimes you play these boards where you have a lot of different 4 costs, like Warriors, Preservers, or like Callista Preservers, or something like that. A lot of times, it's going to be very, very difficult, because if you're going to try and itemize Karma, you're going to put all your AP items on Karma. If you're trying to itemize Fiora, you're putting items on Fiora. Then how the fuck do you put items on Gwen? So the Gwen's basically useless for most of the game. Even if you upgrade to Gwen 2, she's not going to do that much because you need a bunch of items. So there's certain comps like this where you're playing a lot of 4 costs, where you need the items in order to itemize everybody. So it's really, really efficient, because as much as Ornn artifacts might not be the best Ornn artifacts that you find, but having 2 Ornn artifacts or 2 items, it doesn't matter what they are, they all give a large amount of stats. They all give AD, AP, HP, armor, MR. So a lot of times you can just take like a Blacksmith Gloves and throw it on a Gwen in this type of comp. Another example is with Honeymancy. Honeymancy works out really well. Because like this is like in reroll in general. If you're playing a reroll comp and let's say you have 3-star Blitzcrank, 3-star Nunu, 3-star Kog'Maw, 3-star Ziggs, there's no way you have items for all of them. So it's really efficient if you just get like a Blacksmith Glove, for example, just shove it on one of these units. You just throw it on and they'll suddenly have a bunch of extra stats and they will do a lot more than not doing a lot than what they would have done without the Ornn artifacts in general. So that's the point where it's like it doesn't even matter if it's a good Ornn artifact, as long as it doesn't grief your game, as long as it's not something like vampiric acceptor and you throw it on Nunu and then Nunu just like they can't make any use of it and they just lose their ability to cast. Like other than that, it's like they're probably fine just to throw on a unit, and that's something you should always keep in mind. So if you have a comp that requires many items, it's very efficient to use Ornn artifacts because they are just powerful items in general. If you have a comp that can use many different Ornn items, so if we go back to like Honeymancy, for example, Kog'Maw does AD damage, Ziggs does AP damage, then you have a tank. Even with like warriors, for example, right? If you're playing warriors, Fiora versus Gwen versus Katarina, right? These are different units, right? That if you get an AD Ornn artifact, you can put it on Fiora. If you get an AP Ornn artifact, you can put it on Gwen. You're not going to get hoed by the items. So if you have multiple different types of carries, both AD and AP carries, then you can take the artifacts. And I think the last one I was going to say is if you have a comp that has a lot of shielding or frontline units, because a lot of the Ornn artifacts that are generic and frontline, they require shielding as some of the use cases. So that's an example of if you have Rakan as a main front line, Mordekaiser as a main front line, Vex as a main front line. These units that have shielding effects, then Ornn artifacts are usually pretty good because you can use them on those ones. Sorry, I'll update the slideshow for whenever I post it. Okay, artifacts. So these are going to be organized in alphabetical order. So please bear with me as we go through them. And every single slide is going to have a bunch of information on it, and I'll go through each of it. So first one, Anima Visage. So Anima Visage heals maximum health every second. This is very generic. It's a good tank item and it stacks well with a lot of HP. Typically you want to play it with reroll units. It's very good with Honeymancy. One thing to note is that a lot of these slides are going to feature Honeymancy units. That's because Honeymancy is like the main reroll comp right now in the meta. When other rerolls show up, they will be very apparent that like some of these generic tank items will be really good on those units as well. But generically, Honeymancy just fits really well even before it was buffed with Ornn artifacts because of just being a constant reroll that you're rerolling everybody. It can also be good with really tanky melee users for extra damage. So Blitzcrank, Nunu, really good holders. Shen works really well because if you're playing multi-strikers, you just reroll Shen with it and Shen can tank a lot. But then additional users that might still work with it: Rakan, Nasus, high HP units, Taric, Tahm Kench, basically any 4-cost carry. Somebody like Briar, who has a lot of HP, so they get a lot of healing off Anima Visage, but also is like a melee backline unit, could also work with these. I would also like to say the main users and the additional users, these are just some suggestions. I'm trying to make this as beginner focused as possible. I think that if you are like a high diamond master level player, you probably know how to play all of the Ornn artifacts already. So I'm not going to talk about niche lines as much. I'm not going to talk about every single situation and every single stat. Instead, I'm just going to say, hey, if you don't know how to play this, these are a bunch of units that you can use for it. And hopefully that's helpful to the general people watching my video. Next, Blacksmith Gloves. So I already talked about Blacksmith Gloves. It's really good to fill in items. It basically equips 2 random Ornn artifacts. It's really good with comps where you need multiple, where you have multiple carries, you need to itemize everybody. It's also very good on 5 costs. If you have a comp, like if you're going like a fast 9 or you're like very, very rich, hitting 5 costs and just shoving Ornn artifacts on them is a great way to cap your board very, very high. So I just put a couple main users of rerolls like Mordekaiser, Nunu. They can make great use of these items. Also, Gwen is really great at using this, just from the other board that I showed you. A lot of times you don't have items for Gwen if you're itemizing Karma as well as Fiora, so you can just shove items on Gwen. Also, I would suggest taking Blacksmith Gloves when you have a unit on your board that has shielding, just because there's a lot of Ornn artifacts that are tied behind when a shield breaks or when a shield is formed on your unit. I'll talk about those when we get there, but it makes it a little bit less high roll. And generally, you put the Blacksmith Gloves on a frontline unit because frontline units can make better use of all the items, as opposed to like putting a backline unit. Then if you roll backline items, if you roll frontline items on a backline unit, you're kind of screwed. But if you put this on a frontline unit, even if they roll like damage items, they can still make things work out a lot of the time. Blightning Jewel. So this is our first very specific and forcing one. Basically the way Blightning Jewels works is that every attack reduces magic resist by 4. Also, I'm going to lower the volume just a little bit just to make sure that everything is very clear. If their magic resist is 0, then you get mana instead. So this actually works really well with units that do damage over time. Specifically, Karma and Nora are the big hits with this. And the reason is that Karma, when she casts, she does a damage over time effect, and the same with Nora. What that does is it causes the magic resist to dwindle much faster. You don't want to put this item, even though it's like an AP item, it's very bad on somebody like Vigor, somebody like units that try and one-shot or do like one hit of damage. You want to put on somebody that does as many ticks as possible. So that's why it's basically like Exodia if you have Karma or Nora. You can often hard force towards Karma and Nora and get like a guaranteed top 4, even play for first if you have a really strong spot. And then some additional users, I put the hero here because I'm talking about the hero. Like if you have Rumble Hero, it's really good because Rumble's burning effect will cause it to proc many times. Shyvana with the AoE, I say hero, what I mean is the Draconic Mastery augment. Then Shyvana can be like a main carry and you can invest the Blightning Jewel on the Shyvana. And somebody like Swain that has like those AoE area effects can also make use of the item. Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, it's a bit cut off. So for Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, the attacks deal an additional 60% damage as physical damage. Now what it doesn't say here is that Corrupt Vampiric Scepter makes it so that you cannot cast your ability anymore. It is very bad on pretty much every unit in the game. They cannot use their ability anymore. But it's a very forcing item because it's like Exodia. If you have Vampiric Scepter and you have a spot where you have a couple copies of Warwick, that's it. You are playing Warwick reroll. Warwick reroll is basically so fucking strong. The way that you build Warwick is Warwick and then Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, Gwynsu, and QSS. Let me find Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. Right? The reason this works is if you read Warwick's ability, he gains attack speed, which is his passive, and then it slowly scales into more damage, as well as more attack speed like as he kills units, right? So he's like a scaling unit. But if you read him, he doesn't have an active ability. So Corrupt Vampiric Scepter only benefits Warwick. There is no downside to it. It just gives him a bunch of attack speed, which he already wants. It deals additional attack damage, which is great for him. And it also heals the holder, which is also great for him. So this unit just becomes unstoppable, unkillable demon and wins you a lot of the games on the spot. This is an example of a very forcing Ornn artifact. You can't really play this on other units because then they just can't cast anymore. There are some additional uses that look like they're okay in the stats, and that's usually if their ability doesn't matter that much. So for example, Olaf. Olaf's passive is strong enough that his active with the extra attack speed, you can compensate by just giving him Corrupt Vampiric Scepter. I wouldn't recommend trying it all the time, but it is another option. And Kog'Maw as well works in a similar way, that the cast kind of works more as like an attack speed giver, and Corrupt Vampiric Scepter already gives him some of those stats. But usually you see Corrupt Vampiric Scepter, you're playing Warwick reroll. That's pretty much it. And then obviously take with your own risk if you have a good spot for Warwick reroll besides just hitting the Ornn artifact. Death's Defiance now. Death's Defiance is very generic. It's good on melee units. You can even use it on some frontline units for survivability. Often I think people kind of misinterpret Death's Defiance and think that it's like better than Bloodthirster. It's like, oh, it just gives more Omnivamp or just a better Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster still is very useful. A lot of times you'll see Death's Defiance paired with Bloodthirster because Bloodthirster gives a health shield, which is very important for melee units. However, you can still use it on a variety of units. So Hecarim reroll is very good. Briar, Olaf, Diana, units that are at risk of dying, especially if they dash the backline. The Death's Defiance can help a lot by just giving them like an extra lease at life. Having the non-lethal damage or having some damage converted to non-lethal makes it so that if they end up diving the backline, instead of dying, they have a little bit of extra time to kill the enemy carry, and then if they end up killing the carry, they can heal back that damage anyways and they'll be alive. And hence Death's Defiance, they defied death, right? Deathfire Grasp. Deathfire Grasp used to be very bad. It gives an extra little bit of damage amp, which isn't in the slide, and that's what makes it kind of okay to play. Usually you want to put it on AP units. It's not that, it's pretty generic because a lot of units can make use of the extra AP. It's not as good as maybe like another item, like if you have the option of Deathfire or Rabadons. A lot of times the units will probably prefer having a Rabadons. It's very good on Ziggs because Ziggs is very meta and a bit overtuned right now, and it's quite good on Vigor. It's good on a lot of other users. I should have put that it's the Rumble Hero augment, by the way. I didn't put it in the slide. But it's generally pretty good on AP units. It gives a lot of AP, and that's really good. And it also helps you chew through like a main tank. So you often want to position such that, because it zaps the first target for like 20% of their max health. So somebody like Ziggs, where, you know, a lot of times the only way you lose with Ziggs is if he gets stuck on like the main tank in the middle and he doesn't get to snipe the backline. This helps you just chew through the first main tank and then proceed to do damage to the rest of the team. It's not super powerful, like I said, but it is something that is clickable. If you're playing pretty much any AP line can make use of it. Eternal Winter. Now, this is the best item, I believe, in the game. It's been the best item for a lot of the time. Sorry, not in the game. Best Ornn item in the game. And the reason is just because it's very, very generic. It's very strong. It disrupts the opponents. The way that it works, it's a generic frontline item. And after you get hit a bunch of times, the attacker that's attacking you gets stunned. So it's like, it's literally, you can just stun backline units. It can stun pretty much anybody. So if you put on some sort of Giga tank or your main tank that's supposed to live very long, it can disrupt the opponent and can sway a lot of the fights because the stun is substantial. It also chills, which is great because that reduces attack speed in general. And it's just very strong. It's just very strong. It's basically like a win con against Guinsoo users. It's like the Guinsoo worst nightmare. If someone's playing Callista or if someone's playing like a Jinx, you just instantly could win those fights. And because it's such a good generic item, if you see Eternal Winter and you're not sure what to play, you should always click Eternal Winter, right? Some of these other forcing lines, there's a huge risk of if you hit the units that can use them, even stuff that is specific that I say, you still have to find units that can make use of it. Eternal Winter, you'll always have use for it. It will always be good, and you should always take it if you have, you should always take it if you want to be like, you know, careful or smart about it. Fishbones. So Fishbones is one of the Ornn artifacts that's really easy to get. There are a couple prismatic traits. So I'll go here for augments and I'll try and show them. Prismatic. So I forget what it's called, but there's a couple of them that give you, like Spellcaster Toolbox, for example, gives a Manaz Zan and Azanias. There's some of these that give you like pairs of Ornn artifacts. One of them is that it gives you a Snipers and a Fishbone. So it is one that is easy to fish for lack of a better term. So it's something that could be very easy to get. So these are the ones that you should probably have a little bit more of an idea to play around. Fishbones gives a bunch of attack speed and AD. It doubles the attack range of the user, but it also causes them to target a random enemy. Sometimes that's a blessing and sometimes it's a curse. That's why it's a bit specific. Some units really like the extra attack range and really like to target a random user. Somebody like Varus. Varus, you want to try and snipe the backline. Having more range and targeting random users can make it so that Varus randomly just kills the backline unit in one hit. With a lot of damage amp, a lot of attack speed, a lot of AD, the Varus could easily just kill units. This is like the go-to is usually to play Varus with it. Something like Kog'Maw can do that as well. When Kog'Maw's attacking, if he randomly shoots a bullet at the backline, Kog'Maw's really good at doing a lot of damage. The reason is that Varus is Blaster, so he gets the damage amp. Kog'Maw is Hunter, so he gets a bunch of AD. It's really good with units that are like that have high AD or have a lot of damage amp. The random switching could also be a bit of a grief. It says in the stats, because Callista is really meta right now, that it's quite good on Callista, and it's also quite good at on Nomzi. But sometimes this can grief a little bit, just because, like, you know, Callista, if you like, you know, shoot bullets randomly at everybody else, if you don't snipe the backline, then you don't focus on the front line. Sometimes you run into a situation where the whole board is like 1 HP and nobody dies, and then you lose the round like that. So Fishbones, take it at your own risk. I don't particularly like playing around Fishbones that much. I feel like the only person I like consistently with Fishbones is someone like Varus. But in the stats, it's really good. So, you know, obviously, win by the random, die by the random. That's what can sometimes happen. Forbidden Idol. So this one's specific. This is one where your shields get 50% of their value converted to max health. This can set you up for Giga Tanks, right? Blitzcrank is the best user of this for a while. Even before Honeymancy was very meta, Blitzcrank just gets so much shielding off of it, especially with Blitzcrank Hero. It's like Exodia. The same with Mordekaiser. And Vex to a certain degree, Vex it's a little bit worse on because of the way your shielding works. But basically any unit that can shield can use Forbidden Idol. I put a couple of the users in terms of main users and additional users, but this is one that is specific and even forcing in some situations. Because it converts the shielding to max health, you often want to pair it with some sort of healing percentage health. So for example, a Dragon Claw or a Redemption that heals percentage maximum health, because if you keep gaining max health and you heal percentage max health, as the fight goes on, you will heal more, which makes it very Exodia-like. So obviously if you're playing Honeymancy and you hit Forbidden Idol, you can just win on the spot. You can technically play it with any Vanguard. I would like to mention that, because every Vanguard gets a shield at one point in the game, but I do not recommend that. That is like, you know, if you're taking Forbidden Idol because you're playing Vanguards and not because you're specifically playing like Blitzcrank or Mordekaiser, then you might run into a problem where it will do nothing. It will do close to nothing. Next is Gambler's Blade. Gambler's Blade, very generic. It just gives you a bunch of attack speed, and it's a gold generation, right? So this is typically an Econ augment. You take it when you take a Shimmer Scale augment. It's good to pair with Guinsoo's just because Guinsoo will ramp up your attack speed. It gives you starting attack speed with the Gambler's Blade, so it gets your Guinsoo started really well. And then because your Guinsoo is doing a bunch of auto attacks, you're going to farm a lot of gold because in turn, each attack has a 4% chance to drop a gold. So it's really good in certain situations to get your econ rolling. It's bad in stats because I think it's a bit underpowered and overtaken. So take it at your own risk, obviously. You usually take these type of items not for their strength as an item, but more so for their strength as a what's it called? For their strength as an econ generation tool, right? So that's why it fits like that. Somebody that I thought it would be really good on is Callista. I tried it myself. It felt really bad. I think Callista doesn't have enough of an AP ratio for attacking, and I think she just prefers Guinsoo more so than Gambler's Blade. It's just, I think the problem with Gambler's Blade on Callista is also because Callista, like, you might think Gambler's Blade is good on Callista. The problem with Callista is that you don't have enough item slots, because whenever you play Callista, you want to put on the Fairy Crown, you want to put on a Guinsoo, and then your last item is usually going to be a Last Whisper. If you replace that with a Gambler's Blade, you lose a lot of the value of Last Whisper, so that's why I wouldn't take this if you're angling towards Callista, because you just don't have enough item slots for it. And you can't replace Guinsoo with Gambler's Blade. Trust me, it's bad. That's what I tried, and it's fucking bad. And also because of AP ratio. Anyways. When I say Galio, I mean Galio Hero Augment, by the way. Please make note of that if you're looking at it. Mistake on the slide. I'll update it if I ever post these. And then additional users, like obviously when I say Warwick, whenever you see Warwick as an additional user, Warwick is really good into some of these comps, because if you hit Vampiric Acceptor, you're in a win state, so then you just put Gambler's Blade on him instead of Guinsoo, and you just kind of ramp up a bunch of gold, stuff like that. Gold Collector, so this is another generic gold generation one. It's a little bit better because it provides an execute and it gives you a bunch of AD. So you typically want to play it on units that are trying to one-shot or do a shit ton of damage. It's very, very good on Ezreal, and in the stats it's also good on Jinx and Kog'Maw. These are units that are either hunters, that they gain a bunch of AD, so they have this high one-shot potential, or they're doing like this massive damage in burst with the blaster form of Ezreal. Additional users could also be Olaf and Briar. Units that can dive the backline or have high mobility can randomly execute the backline, so they're very, very good. But it's pretty generic. Most AD units will be able to use it, so there's a lot of people I didn't put on this slide that can still make use of it, because you can just put on a backline unit and have some sort of extra damage and crit chance. Horizon Focus. So this one's a little bit more specific. The way Horizon Focus works is that whenever you stun an enemy, you deal 30% of their maximum health as magic damage. So you need a unit that stuns, right? Because you have to stun an enemy. If you don't stun an enemy, it doesn't really do anything. So if you can't stun an enemy, you can't really use it. It can be devastating with some builds. I think some builds can easily win and be very, very strong. But it's not necessarily Exodia. I find that even in the cases where you think that it would be Exodia, like Nami or Tahm Kench, it doesn't carry your board. It's not like Tahm Kench is going to be your main carry. You still need a backline unit, you still need like other items. You still need something to help your board out, especially somebody like Nami. Horizon Focus doesn't give backline stats. It gives primarily frontline stats. So Nami doesn't make great use of it. Nami does a shit ton of damage because she stuns the whole board. There was a video that I showed you with Horizon Focus on my channel with Nami, and it is quite good. It's just that you lack a lot of the damage. It's not like winning on the spot. It's just something to play towards. You can also work with Shyvana, but I recommend only doing that with Draconic Mastery. I don't think you should ever like itemize and carry around Shyvana for most of your game unless you're dedicated Shyvana reroll. It's also good on Nico. Here on the slide, I also put Shen. By the way, there is a very, very strong tech. That's not the Shen Hero augment. The Shen Hero augment is very bad right now, and it either has to be buffed or it's bugged. Who knows? But Horizon Focus with Shen is very, very, very strong. I tried it. I don't have a video for you because I low rolled very hard that game. I rolled like 100 gold and I didn't hit Shen 3, but it's very strong, trust me. Basically you just play Vertical Bastion with a Callista backline, and you play Horizon Focus on Shen, and Shen does 3 stuns, and all 3 of the stuns cleave 30% of the max health as additional magic damage. So if you have a Shen 3, you can actually play towards that niche line, but obviously play at your own risk. It is very easy to low roll it. I low rolled it and I went 5th, so I can't recommend it 100%, but I'll still put it on the slide because it's something that people should know about. Hcrush. So Hcrush is a generic item. Basically, it gives you a bunch of armor, MR, and attack speed. It is very generic, and basically, if there's no adjacent enemies to you, or sorry, no adjacent allies at the round start, you gain 600 health. So it gives you a bunch of health, a bunch of armor, and a bunch of attack speed. It's very generic. It's very, it's very good. It's very generic. You can use it on frontline. Typically, you can put it on a solo frontline unit. It used to be quite good on units like Wukong, for example, that can make use of the defensive stats. Units like Blitzcrank or Nunu that are like the main go-to reroll units are very good, or Mordekaiser, if you're rerolling them, are very good. The other people that it's good on, because it gives attack speed. I don't know if it gives armor, because on my slides, I took these from a website because I needed to get the picture as well as the name of the effect efficiently. I took it from Meta TFT. Some of the Ornn artifacts don't have all the information on them. I'll cite my sources at the end of the slideshow, by the way. Don't worry about that. But it's just like, I don't want to double check it. But either way, because it gives you a lot of defensive stats, it's good against units that can dive or have good mobility that need a lot of tankiness. Gwen Fiora are really good because Gwen scales as the fight goes on, and Fiora can dive the backline. Soul Crusher is also good on like melee units, and that's something you should also consider. Infinity Force. So Infinity Force is another one that you can get Freaky Friday, so you can get multiple Infinity Forces in your game. It gives a little bit of everything. It gives AD, AP, armor, MR, HP. It basically gives a little bit of everything. So it's quite generic. You can put it on pretty much anybody because it will give you a little bit of everything. But it's not particularly strong unless your unit can make use of all the stats. So for example, Frost units have really good AP and AD ratio, specifically Olaf and Diana. So putting this on an Olaf is very, very strong because Olaf will make use of all of the stats. He's a melee unit, so he makes use of HP, armor, and MR because he's going to be in the front line. He makes use of the attack speed, the AP, and the AD because of his scaling on both AP and AD. One helps with his Omnivamp and his attack damage. One helps with Omnivamp, the other helps with his attack damage, and the other helps with his speed. It's very good. Units like Briar, for example, as well as Fiora also make great use of it. This is typically, Infinity Force was typically the, I hit a melee unit or I'm playing multiple melee units, so I can just take Infinity Force and itemize. It's good for item economy, and it's like an okay prismatic to take if you need to fill in some items on some units. Innovating Locket. So Innovating Locket, basically the holder gains 2% of their total mana whenever they're hit by an attack. So basically they gain more mana, which helps them to cast a lot more, and then the cast restore the holder's HP. This is very good on solo tanks because they basically just absorb a lot of hits and just constantly cast. It's also good with high HP units that are shapeshifters. This used to be the Exodia when Elise Hero Augment was very strong. It is still very good on Elise, by the way, so even if you're not playing Hero Augment Elise and you're just playing Vertical Shapeshifter Elise, you can definitely play this with Elise still. But it was also like a win con for Wukong, and it's also one of Vex's best items because Vex gets a shield every time she casts. So basically she'll just never take any damage. She casts, she gets a shield, she recovers 20 HP. She casts again, she gets another shield, she recovers 20% HP. She casts, she gets another shield, etc. It just never ends. And the same with somebody like Mordekaiser, and the same with some other units that can make great use of that. Specifically like Vanguards in some cases and Shapeshifters in other cases. It's very good with reroll because it also ensures that the unit has IHP. Like Nunu, for example, is very good with it. And like I said, it can be Exodia in like Wukong, Vex, and even Elise. Spider Queen Elise with Innovating Locket is still probably like a firstable board, like game winning, even though Elise got nerfed so much. So just watch out for those type of situations. Lichbane. So Lichbane, the holder's first attack after each ability cast deals much more magic damage. It's very good with boards that generally are doing a bunch of AP damage. It's also very good against with units that cast many times. Ziggs and Vigor are very good examples of this. Generally, it's underpowered. I wouldn't say it's like game winning on the spot or anything like that. It's quite good on some units, like the Honeymancy units. I've also seen it be really good on Karma and Gwen, units that either attack or cast a bunch. Just because it just generally gives you a lot more damage, but it's a little bit underpowered in terms of the stats that it gives. So it's like a trade-off. It kind of works out to almost like a net zero in some cases, right? Like, you know, would you rather have this or a Rabadon's? Right, the first attack after each deals some bonus magic damage, or I just have Rabadons, I just constantly deal more damage, right? That's kind of the trade-off sometimes. So it's very specific. I think Ziggs and Vigor specifically work really well, which is great, but that's more related to Honeymancy and just Honeymancy being strong. Light Shield Crest. So with Light Shield Crest, it basically gives you some armor. I think it also gives you MR, I might be wrong. But every 3 seconds, it shields the lowest percentage ally for 50% of the combined armor and magic resist. It's quite generic. This isn't like a game-winning item by any means, but it is quite good if you're in need of a front line, or if you're in need of extra shielding, like if you feel like your team is a bit glassy, or if you're playing, like for example, if you're playing against like a lot of melee boards, right? If you look in your lobby and there's a lot of Fioras, a lot of Gwens, a lot of Olafs, where you're scared that your backline might die randomly. It's actually very good in those cases, because basically the lowest ally will get some of the shielding from whatever your main tank is. Because it scales really well with armor, a lot of times you would play Light Shield Crest with like a gargoyle setup. You would have a solo frontline unit that just takes a whole bunch of punishment, and then the Light Shield Crest will then start shielding a bunch of other units. When the unit dies, by the way, Light Shield Crest will also proc and give your whole team a shield. But that's not mentioned on the slide. I thought these would have been updated on the website, but I guess the website I used wasn't that great, so it is what it is. And it's also sometimes good with bastions. I wouldn't recommend it playing like vertical bastion, Light Shield Crest. It's not like an Exodia thing. It's just like a nice to have. If there's a unit with a bunch of armor and MR, then you can make great use of Light Shield Crest. Next we have Ludens Tempest. So Ludens Tempest, overkill damage plus 100 is dealt as magic damage to 3 enemies nearest to the target. Basically, it's specific because you want it on high damage and burst units. So these are either your hunters, Ziggs that just drops a giant bomb on the enemy and often one-shots units, Varus, Ezreal, blasters that do this high damage. You want to kill and you want to overkill. Namzi is a great user of Ludens Tempest because it gives AP. It gives AP and ADs. So you can use it on either AP or AD units. It's not just an AP item, despite it being purple. It often doesn't proc unless you do massive damage. So you have to get to a point where you're playing like a vertical trait, very strong. Like Varus, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're playing something towards like 4 or 6 blaster. Right, if you're just playing Varus normally, it's gonna do nothing. You want to make use of the AP and the AD ratio. Somebody like Ezreal has a really good AP and AD scaling on him. So it's really good on somebody like Ezreal. But either way, the whole idea is that your board has to be really fucking strong because you want overkill damage. You don't want to just kill and waste the Ludens Tempest. You want it to be like when you strike them, they take so much damage that it then translates to additional damage to other units. In general, Ludens Tempest is not like an Exodia thing. It's not going to win you the game on the spot. It's not like, oh, Ludens Tempest, I play Ezreal, I win. It's very difficult because a lot of times, especially towards the end of the game, you're not getting those great numbers on the overkill, because as other people's boards get stronger, they obviously are going to take less damage. It's more like a punishing thing. Like if you're playing against people that don't have upgraded units, you just absolutely obliterate their whole board. Next is Manaz Zan. So Manaz Zan, the way that works is after your first cast, you basically gain 120 mana. This item is a lot better now because now mana gets refunded after your cast. So if you get mana locked, the mana comes in eventually. So basically it just guarantees a bunch of extra casts. You want to play it on units that require a lot of casting. It's quite generic, but you can basically use it on pretty much any backline AP unit or carry that needs to cast. And it can replace a lot of other mana items. So somebody like Ziggs in the current meta is very good with it. Someone like Hui is really good with it because Hui, The biggest problem with Wei is just like his third cast is so important, so you want to get through like the first couple of casts really fast so that he can do like massive damage to multiple units. Syndra is really good with it because she can scale really well, especially if you Manaz Zan early. She'll just cast so many times in the early fights that she'll get to like those high damage numbers towards the late game if you're playing Syndra reroll. And Ezreal just like getting multiple giant blasts off could help out your whole board. A lot of times people will take Manaz Zan because Manaz Zan with Spellcaster's Toolkit also gives you a Zhonya's, and the Manaz Zan Zhonya's combo for Gwen is very, very strong. That's why Gwen appears a lot on these stats, and I'll talk about it with Zhonya's as well. Other units like Zillion that just have a lot of stun, or Diana that gets a lot of shielding and chilling on the back line, they make great use of these items because for utility's sake, you get the Manaz Zan off by a lot. Nami wasn't that great in the stats for it, but Nami would also be like a pick if she was a little bit more meta right now, in terms of like the amount of damage that she did, because she can get off a lot of stuns. Mittens. So Mittens is really cute. It shrinks your user down and it makes them, they have increased movement speed, which means they can run around a lot faster, and they have immunity to chill, which is great. So basically it's like uninterrupted attack speed. It's pretty generic because it gives attack speed and most units can make use of attack speed, but in reality, if you're trying to play for like a good placement, it's a little bit specific to certain units. Specifically like Briar, Olaf, Camille make really great use of Mittens because they dive around, they jump around a lot, they run through a lot of different units, and having them with the increased movement speed greatly can increase their amount of damage that they can do. Generally it's alright, but it's more for melee, right? That's like the immunity to chill and everything. Just having 60 attack speed on a backline unit doesn't really help all that much. The movement speed is really important. The movement speed really helps out with melee users as they're walking to different targets, and they're moving around a lot, right? Like a lot of times I'm sure you've played the game and you're playing like, you know, there's a clip on my Twitch channel where I'm playing Briar and I'm like, pick up the pace, Briar! Like I'm screaming because like I lost the fight because Briar took too long to walk to the other side of the board, right? And that's something that happens a lot with melee carries. They might, like, they slowly walk from one side to the other after killing a unit. So having the increased movement speed helps that out a lot. And that's why it's more of a melee thing that you have to kind of force and build towards. But, you know, it's pretty generic because you can play it with almost any melee and make use of it. So that's why it's, like, somewhere in between there. Mogul's Mail. So this is another econ generation. It gives some HP, and then it gives armor and magic resist, and then it stacks. It's pretty generic, but it's mostly an econ item. It's been really nerfed, so it's quite underpowered right now, so I would avoid it. The go-to that you would take with Mogul's Mail is usually, the go-to that you would play with Mogul's Mail, was always Wukong, because it gives armor. The Wukong scaled really well. You gave him gargoyles and moguls, and then you cashed out all the time. You got so much gold, you guaranteed you hitting your board and capping your board really high. It's also pretty good on Rakan in the current meta because Rakan's so difficult to kill if you have something like 7 fairies set up. Basically the way you should treat moguls now is like if you already have a unit that's hard to kill, this item kind of does nothing, but it will cash you out a bunch of gold that can help you convert your board into a really high position. But that being said, I wouldn't necessarily take it because it's a bit underpowered right now. Prowler's Claw. So Prowler's Claw, basically after you kill a target, you shed negative effects, and then you dash to the furthest target within 4 hexes. Now 4 hexes is a lot. Basically if you look at a board, 4 hexes is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So basically if you're anywhere like close to the center of the board, there's a good chance that you actually make it to the enemy carry that's tucked in the corner. So Prowler's Claw is very, very strong in terms of like dashing. Now the thing is, it can also grief you very hard. If you dash to the wrong spot, you know, you're just running around and then all of a sudden you just lose because your unit's not in a good positioning. There's a little bit of an RNG aspect to it, but with good positioning it can make a lot of good, it can have a really good effect. The thing with Prowler's Claw is that it gives AD and crit chance, so you want to build it probably with like a big crit build, try and get like the one-shot kill, and then dash to another unit, get another one-shot kill, and kind of keep resetting and going nuts. The best user of it is Hcrush right now. Hcrush is so fucking strong, especially with Unleash the Beast. Even without Unleash the Beast, you can play Hcrush reroll. Playing with Prowler's Claw with the Hcrush, he literally kills a unit. Hcrush has an on-kill effect, by the way, so when Hcrush kills a unit, he will dash to an enemy and gain extra damage. So he'll gain extra damage, gain crit chance, and like he just fucking goes around and one-shots everything. It's fucking ridiculous. So Hcrush is the main pick, but it's also good on other melee units like Olaf, Fiora, and it's also been quite good on Nyla for a while. Prowler's Claw is something you can get from a augment as well. There is the prismatic augment that gives you a Prowler's Claw. I don't recommend taking that augment. I don't think it's particularly strong. I think that it's a waste of a prismatic because I don't think Prowler's Claw is like game winning. It's not like Exodia unless you're playing around Hcrush. But obviously take it with your own regard. Poppy and Rumble it's also really good on, but those are with the hero augment specifically, because Poppy's hero augment, she does like a shit ton of damage, and then having her able to dash within 4 hexes means that she can kill a unit and then mid cast just go kill another unit. Rumble, this was something I'm not sure about. I've heard people talk about it being really good with Rumble hero augment because Rumble's hero augment with the crit chance is very, very strong. It is quite good, but it feels very cheesy. It doesn't give Rumble good stats, it just gives the crit chance. So you're basically trying to like cheese kill the opponent's backline unit. I would recommend being cautious of that. Obviously, it's a very specific Exodia situation of like you have Rumble hero augment, Rumble 3, and you hit a Prowler's Claw. But I wouldn't like force the Prowler's Claw on the Rumble. I think there might even be better other options for like other units on your board, like maybe an item for Tristana, who is usually your backline carry when you're playing Rumble hero. So that's what I mean. I would be cautious about it. But then like other units like Briar and Warwick, obviously, if you have the situation where they are in a setup, you can use it on them as well. Rapid Fire Cannon. So this is like the analogy to like Mittens. Mittens is a very good frontline unit. Rapid Fire Cannon is very good for backline. It's basically the same thing, except it gives more attack speed. It just gives a bunch of attack speed, and then it also gives attack range that gets increased whenever you kill an enemy. So it's quite generic because you can use it on pretty much anybody. It just gives a bunch of attack speed. Starting attack speed is also really, really strong, especially if you have a Guinsoo holder, right? Because Guinsoo ramps up with time, but if you give yourself a bunch of starting attack speed, the Guinsoo is going to ramp a lot faster. So it helps out a lot. The increased attack range is also very good. Somebody like Varus that can snipe the backline with a giant AoE would love to have extra attack range. Smolder, because of stacking attack speed, is really good in Kog'Maw. And then some other suggestions like Warwick, Twitch, Cassiopeia. A lot of Guinsoo users really like to have Rapid Fire Cannon because it just sets them up really, really well. It also makes it, because it gives them increased attack range that gets increased every time they kill. Somebody like Cassiopeia, a lot of times she'll like walk up really slowly, or Jinx as well when you're like going for like the last kill on the enemy carry. This makes it so that like they have a lot, they can just stay tucked in their corner and just focus on auto attacking, so there's no downtime on them ramping up their Guinsoo. The other thing that's really good with it is that sometimes you can snipe the enemy carry. Because of the increased attack range, once you kill the main tank, if you get an increased attack range, here, I'll try and show it like with this. Let me show you here. So like, let's say you have like a bunch of attack range and you're attacking the enemy, and the enemy's carry is like over here. What can happen sometimes is that like if you're on the same side as the enemy and you kill this tank and you kill another tank, you get so much attack range that you just instantly start targeting the backline unit, even if they have more melee units, right? Like let's say they have like 3 tanks. Here, I'll just put like 3. I'll put 3 units in the front line, right? You'll kill Jace, you'll kill Blitzcrank, and then you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You'll have enough range to hit the Ziggs. So instead of targeting the Nomsy, sometimes you target the Ziggs and then you kill the backline unit. That's what I mean. Because of the increased attack range you get on kill. So a lot of times if you position same size as the enemy, you can actually snipe a kill if their front line isn't that good. So it's very good in those situations as well. Seeker's Arm Guard. So takedowns increase the holder's armor, magic resistance, and ability power by 10, and then that's increased to 15 if they score the kill themselves. It's a little bit, it's pretty generic, but it's also very specific in terms of if you can put it on a unit that actually gets the kills, you get a lot more value off of it. It gives AP, so you want to put on an AP frontline unit typically. Units like Mordekaiser and Gwen can make great use of it. Mordekaiser is very good at just killing units. He does a lot of damage while tanking. Gwen as well, being like a melee AP unit, this gives her a lot of survivability to get those casts off for her snip casts, which can also unlock a lot of her potential. But then again, you can also use it on generic frontline units with rerolls like Nunu. Nunu hero augment, this would be really good with as well. I didn't put the hero thing, but even outside the hero augment, even if they don't get the kill, they will slowly increase their armor and MR, so it's still helpful to those units. And then there's other units that you can use it on, for example, Rumble hero, Shyvana with the dragon, Dragon Mastery augment. Kassadin as well, a little bit slept on, but Kassadin makes really great use of some of these Ornn artifacts because Kassadin scales into the late game, right? Every attack that Kassadin does, he gains extra damage on his autos. That's just his effect. So if you give him armor and MR, as well as increasing that every time he scores a kill, it gives him a lot of tankiness that allows him to scale per fight to do a lot more damage. Silvermere Dawn. So this one is specific or forcing. It gives insane AD. Right now, if you look at the stats, I'm pretty sure it's like the best performing Ornn artifact. Let me just go just to show you. Items, artifacts. It's the best performing, right? It's very, very fucking strong. And the reason is that it gives you so much AD. It gives you 165% AD. It's insane. It's fucking bananas. And basically what it does is it stuns every time you attack. And what it doesn't say here is the negative effect of Silvermere Dawn is that it makes it so that your attack speed is locked at 0.5. So it slows down your attack speed a lot. But all the same, that's good compensation so long as you have units that are trying to snipe or do a bunch of damage at once. So for example, Hcrush has an on-kill effect. So giving him a bunch of AD, it doesn't matter that his attack speed's lower because he procs the on-kill effect and Hcrush reroll, he'll just go nuts and he'll kill everything. Fiora, she can snipe the backline and having stun is really good, and the same with Camille, she can jump and dive and snipe the backline. Having the insane amount of AD can make it very easy for you to just win on the spot. It's not like a guaranteed Exodia because like it's not something that's like broken because you know you still have to position, you still have to play things, you still have to like have matchups and you have to hit the units and everything. But a lot of the time, if you have this and you have a stable board, the Fiora will have enough time to just go to the back line and then she'll just one-shot everything because she has so much AD. It's also really good with Jace. Jace, I don't know. I saw it in the stats, so I put it on the slide. You can try it out. I haven't tried it out yet. And then Poppy Hero Augment, the same reason why I was explaining Poppy Hero Augment before. She can just kill units really fast and then with all the AD and then just reset and keep killing. Sniper's Focus. Sniper's Focus is like an oldie goldie. It gives an increased attack range, and then with that extra attack range, you then gain damage amp for the spaces between you and the target. So it's really good with units that want attack range, but it also works really, really well on units that already can snipe the backline, right? So for example, somebody like Rise really likes Sniper Focus in a lot of cases because he does like that attack where he does like the AoE and it basically just hits everybody. It makes it so that those bullets that go very, very far away do a whole bunch extra damage. Units like Xerath and Milio and Nami can make great use of it because they're going to hit units that are very far away. So while it works on a lot of units, typically you either want units that have AoE or that are sniping from afar. Somebody like Varus, Rise, and then some of the other options that I showed here like Kog'Maw, Nami, Xerath. Those units that already have access to hitting backline units. I think even Karma is not stated here, but Karma I think is just because of the stats on it. It's not that good. But Karma also can make great use of it. Basically units that already could randomly hit backline units. You just give them a bunch more damage now with Sniper's Focus. Spectral Cutlass. So this is very forcing. This is very cheesy. Basically what Spectral Cutlass does is that you teleport to the opposite side of the board. You mirrored exactly. So like let's say you want to like if you're here and you have Spectral Cutlass, you'll teleport to where the Nomsi is, right? The mirrored part of the board. The teleporting happens before the round starts, right? Officially. So if you teleport to the backline, you don't have a good build, you will just die instantly, right? It's really good on units like Hcrush and Olaf and Camille because you just get them instantly on the backline carry, and you can just kill them. Now, obviously, if people see that you have a Spectral Cutlass, they'll play around it, and then it just turns into a giant shit show, and it just messes up. It's just like a ridiculous game. But a lot of times, you want to pair it with an Edge of Night. You want to pair it with something that de-aggroes and allows your unit to just like, you know, dive the backline. If you get hit, you get de-aggroed. Then the Olaf's on the backline unit. The backline unit is now attacking your main tank, and then Olaf just deletes the whole backline. That's like the idea behind it. The same with Hcrush, the same with Camille. If you don't have that type of situation and you don't force towards that type of build, then you're kind of fucked. And a lot of times they'll just teleport to the back line. The enemy carrier will be like, oh shit, there's somebody in front of me. I guess I'll just attack them. And then you just instantly kill. Right? Obviously, if they have a really weak backline that isn't very stable, then you can teleport to the backline and cheese them and kill them. But that's going to work like 1 or 2 fights. It's not going to work all the time. So you have to be very careful with it. It could win you the game on the spot, but You have to play very, very well around it, and you also have to have a good item and good build to properly capitalize on it. Next. So, Suspicious Trenchcoat. Suspicious Trenchcoat's pretty generic, but it could be specific in some cases. So, it splits the user and makes 3 copies of themselves once during the fight at 50% health. A lot of the time, you want to put it on good melee units that can snipe the backline or have a lot of utility. For example, Briar does a stun, Fiora hits multiple units and can easily snipe the backline, and Olaf as well can do the same thing, right? If he splits up and he does a bunch of damage, it's very hard to deal with. These units make great use of Suspicious Trenchcoat because, they, like, you know, if you have 3 copies of Fiora, you know, they now have to dodge 3 different Fioras with their backline in order to not die. So a lot of times, like, one Fiora will finish the job that the other Fiora didn't do, and the same with Briar and the same with Olaf. The main problem with Suspicious Trenchcoat is that it also kind of de-aggros. So it's not that great on frontline tanks, but it's still usable on frontline tanks. So you can put on a Siobhan, you can put on a Nasus, but sometimes it might grief your game. So a lot of times you want to put it on a melee unit that can do damage. It's better on melee units than primary tanks. It is playable on primary tanks, but that's why it's a little bit specific. You really want to have a unit that does a lot of backline damage so that they can make use of this Trenchcoat and then split up and do damage. But in the same theory, you know, having Trenchcoats isn't that bad because you're just tripling a unit, which helps out in a lot of comps and can help out with your front line and or your damage. It's just good. Something that I put on the slide. Now, I'm going to say very clearly, do not try this. I just want to say that in the stats, there's a lot of times Suspicious Trenchcoat is very, very good on these random backline units like Soraka and Seraphine and these reroll comps. I do not think that it is good on these backline units. I put it on the slide kind of as a joke. And if you're playing like an unranked version of a game, I'm not ranked for sure. I'm going to say it very clear. If you're playing an unranked version of the game, or you're playing like a for fun thing, like maybe like a Talker's Trial, if that's still around, you can put on a backline unit, because what happens sometimes is if your backline unit, like let's say you're fighting against a melee carry, and they snipe your backline, and then your backline just splits into 3, you just triple your damage output, right? So sometimes that can happen, and in the stats it shows up sometimes. Obviously it's a very low play rate, it's a very situational thing, and that's more of like a late game thing, right? Like if you get a Trenchcoat, and you're playing against, I don't know, let's say you're playing Fiora and you have a Trenchcoat, right? You could put the Trenchcoat on a backline unit. Fiora tries to kill your backline unit, splits into 3. Fiora de-aggros now, because that's what happens when the Trenchcoat pops. They kind of like walk away a little bit, and now you just tripled your damage, right? Like it's very counter matchup, which is very interesting. Talsman of Ascension. This is very forcing. It's very bad Ornn artifact. Try not to take Talsman of Ascension. Talsman of Ascension, basically, after 22 seconds, you gain a bunch of max health and damage amp. It is very, 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 very strong. It can win you on the spot. It can be Exodia. I have a video where I played Nasus with Talsman of Ascension, and I was 8 Shapeshifter Nasus. And that's a case where I took it because my Nasus never died and always procced Ascension, and Nasus scales his damage off of HP, so it works out really, really well. It's also really good on hero augments, for example, like Spider Queen Elise, where she's unkillable. If you have Elise with like Innovating Locket already, and you had a Talsman of Ascension, that's another case where she'll be unkillable. Or something like Mordekaiser, which is generally unkillable if you're playing like a vertical Vanguard setup and you have Mordekaiser 3. The thing is that it takes 22 seconds. A lot of the time, the fight is over by 22 seconds. A very win more type of situation. Very rarely is it the correct decision to take Talsman of Ascension and not just take an Ornn artifact that has stats that helps your team, right? If you take Talsman of Ascension and you're not angling towards something like a vertical Shapeshifter or a vertical Vanguard, or you're not angling towards a reroll with a hero augment, the chances are it just won't proc ever, and you would have been better off like with literally any other item that could get use, because, you know, if the fight doesn't last 22 seconds, the item is useless. But if the fight lasts 22 seconds, then you probably can win the fight. But you're probably better off getting an item that will help you in the first 22 seconds of the fight. That's what I'm trying to say. So, you know, take it at your own risk. Very, very situational. Tricksters Glass. So, Tricksters Glass basically makes a clone. The clone is 70% max health and more max mana, which just means that they're going to cast slower and they have a little bit less HP. You also can't put items on the clone. This item is very generic. It's also specific in some cases. Like you can technically, it's like a +1. You just like double any unit that you want. That's good sometimes. It's good in general, but it's just not particularly strong unless you hit like these very, very strong options. It's very good with reroll. Reroll tanks, like if you reroll Blitzcrank and Nunu, you basically get a +1 Honeymancy unit. So the Honeymancy unit also deals a lot of damage based on the damage that they take. So if you have a 3-star Nunu and you just duplicate it, guess what? You're just now getting a bunch of extra Honeymancy damage in addition to having an extra tank on your board that is a 3-star with a lot of HP. So it's very good in those situations. That's what I mean by it's a little bit specific. Like if you really want to make it work and actually like convert it to like a reliable top 4, often you're playing it with a reroll, or you're playing it with like utility units like Nami, right? Nami or Varus or Fiora, units where like multiple copies of them will either snipe the backline or cause there to be more stuns or cause there to be more damage. Things like that is where it works out really well. Something else with Tricksters Glass is that it's very, very strong with 2 tanky. 2 tanky is I don't know if it's very strong, but a lot of times when you're playing 2 tanky, basically what that is like when you have 2 copies of a unit, then they gain a bunch of extra stats. That's like an augment that you can play. Trickster's Glass works with that if you don't know. That's like old archaic tech. It's been always like that. So you can use Trickster's Glass to duplicate one of your units, and then because you're probably not going to itemize the secondary unit anyways in a lot of the cases, you'll just get a lot of extra value because you won't have to commit one of your, because the extra clone from Trickster's Glass doesn't count towards the limited units that you can put on your board. So basically you get a free 2 tanky value with Trickster's Glass. So that's really great. That's like where it's more specific and Exodia like, where you actually get there. Unin Despair. We're actually closing the end soon here, so hopefully you enjoyed the video so far. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like this video. Unin Despair. So basically, whenever a shield breaks, 125% of that shield's value is dealt to the nearest enemy as magic damage. This is quite specific. It's good with units that have shielding. It can work really great with reroll in some situations, namely Blitzcrank, Mordekaiser, and Vex. It has to work with, the unit has to have shielding though. So Diana, Morgana are really great, Kassadin, Wukong, Rakan. If the unit doesn't have shielding, it pretty much does nothing. So, except give like a bunch of HP or a little bit of HP. So, typically you're just going to put it on a unit that has some sort of shielding, and then it feels very Exodia-like. Like Mordekaiser 3 with this item will do an insane amount of damage, and Blitzcrank 3 with this item will do an insane amount of damage. And Vex as well works really well with it. Wit's End. Wit's End's quite specific. Basically, attacks deal bonus magic damage. The attacks also heal for 35% of all the magic damage dealt. Typically, you want to put this on auto attackers. You can put it on pretty much anybody to a certain extent. Like a lot of melee units can use it pretty well, but generally you want to put it on auto attackers. The way you could think about it is like it's a little bit of a better gunblade and it pairs really well with Guinsoo. The attacks themselves deal bonus magic damage. So you want a unit that is doing a lot of attacks. You want a unit with a Guinsoo that is stacking. Units like Olaf, it works really well because Olaf gains a bunch of attack speed. Guinsoo is also not even that bad on Olaf in some cases because of how much attack speed he gains when he casts. But typically you're going to play it on somebody like Cassiopeia. This is like a Cassiopeia reroll angle. It's good with in certain cases with multi-strikers as well because they really love Guinsoos. That's not on the slide right now. Good with Warwick. Good with Galio Hero Augment as well. Because Galio Hero Augment is typically making Guinsoos and stacking damage based on ramping up a Guinsoo. But that's basically how you pair up this item. You want it on an auto attacker, and that's why it can be very forcing. Because typically if you see it, you're kind of just angling towards somebody who's playing a Guinsoo and hoping for the best. And last item, Zhonya's. So Zhonya is basically, it's like a better Edge of Night. Once per combat, you basically become invulnerable for 3 seconds and untargetable, and it gives you a bunch of AP as well as some defensive stats. It's very good for, it's very generic because it's good for survivability. You can put it on most melee units, even though it doesn't give like AD, it's still like a very good melee item in general because of the stats that it gives. And the fact that it basically allows you to become invulnerable. It also prevents a lot of backline users from getting sniped. Because it's an AP item, it gives a lot of AP. So putting on a Ryze, a Xerath, even a Ziggs, it's very, very high value. Because it makes it so that you don't run into a situation where like, you know, for example, if you get dove by like a Fiora, or you get dove by somebody else who has an Ornn artifact because you're playing the Ornn artifact galaxy and everybody has one, you basically save yourself from dying. And that's really big. That's why it's very generic. You don't have to, like, it's a lot better on certain melee units like Katarina, Kassadin, for example. Shyvana, if you have Draconic Mastery, it goes absolutely bonkers. It's fucking nuts, right? But because you can use it on pretty much any AP unit and still get value out of it, it's one of the best Ornn artifacts to get, and a lot of times you take it. Anyways, So that was the slideshow. I'm going to put these slides in my Discord in a channel for resources. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content. I don't know if I'll update this every single patch, but this was like a general overview and I went through each Ornn artifact. Hopefully it was useful to you, and if you found it useful, please make sure to like and subscribe. And I'll do more guides a little bit more during the week. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys around. And yeah, a little bit of a change from always doing the VOD reviews. Thank you for watching and have a great day.